What is up, Chicago Bears fans? This is T Formation Conversation. I'm your host, Lester Wiltfong. I don't do a lot of T formations during the season, but in the off season, I try and stick a few in here every now and again. And today I'm joined by my guy, Windy City Gridiron's lead draft analyst, Jacob Infante. Jacob, my man, what is going on with you tonight?
Not too much. Just, good to unwind a little bit at the end of the day. Nice to be able to talk football, and with the draft coming up. I mean, it's a fun time of year for sure. So I'm excited to be here, as always, as we've been doing for, years now at this point.
It's always draft season for you. You never take a break. You are the hardest working. I mean, you have mock drafts all year round. You're always building your big board. And speaking of your big board, how many prospects you watched this year?
480. That's my record. Wow. Yeah, that's a record for me. What I went through is I went up every single year, and then 2024, I don't remember exactly what the number was, but I took a step down, and then this one's my biggest one yet. So just
that's good a lot. To be. That's a lot of stuff. And speaking of your board, you can get that on your Patreon. You want to go ahead and plug that real quick before we get the show going?
Oh yeah. So you can check that out on, so it's patreon.com/Jacob Infante. You can check out my entire draft guide, which is my whole big board of 480 players with relative athletic scores for each. Cause everyone loves those analytics, positional rankings, scouting reports for my top 50 players. I do a 7-round mock draft to do player comparisons. I do like superlatives or whatever for, each position in this draft class. So it's a lot of fun. I put a lot of work into it every year. This time it was 103 pages worth of good, fun draft stuff. So definitely recommend checking it out. And, there's some other exclusive content like draft related. And, most of my draft stuff, most of my Bears stuff is at Windy City Gridiron, but every once in a while I'll throw a little something on the Patreon, and, definitely recommend checking it out. Thanks for letting me do a little, cheap plug there for a little bit.
Well, plus you're also on Pro Football Network, right?
Yes. Yeah. So I've been doing a lot of scouting reports on there too. Pro Football Network's had me for, it's like scouting reports and mock drafts, which I never realized how tough it is to write a 7-round mock draft with explanations until I actually went through and did it. And it is you have to love it. Otherwise you're going to absolutely hate it. So it's, but it's a good time though. It's a good time. And this is my first draft with them. Hopefully, can, keep doing the, this and Windy City Gridiron and, juggling the whole deal. So.
No, it's a good site. I mean, they have a great draft simulator, which all fans love playing with the draft simulator. There's a few out there. I tend to kind of play around a little bit and kind of go to all of them so I can get a good mixture. But I really like theirs. I think theirs does a good job. I think it's a good place for them. When I say you're the hardest working part-time draft guy out there, because this is your part-time, this is your love, this is your hobby. This ain't the full-time gig. This isn't paying the bills yet. So if anyone wants to hire Jacob full time, of course, I'm sure he'd be willing to listen for that. But you got to meet those high demands of the Jakester.
Yeah. My more creative demands and put up with the PR liability that I am. But
it's okay. That makes it more fun that way. So this kind of be like, I know you're also streaming on your Twitter account now. So fans who kind of come to Jacob for that account. Same kind of deal here. We're going to kind of open up a Q&A here. But before we jump into some stuff, from questions on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, I'm going to jump over to our site, Windy City Gridiron. We kind of threw a few questions, a Q&A in the comment section. So I want to start off there, if that's cool with you. And first one here is from Michael Hodson on WCG. Look, the Bears may not go first round running back. A lot of fans want to take Genty. That's obviously a big time guy there, but he's asking of all the non-first round talents, and I'm not sure how many you have going in the first round, but of the non-first round running backs, who is your best fit for the Bears?
Yeah, so I'd say the first round running backs in this class are Ashton Genty out of Boise State and Omarion Hampton out of UNC. I think those are the top two guys for me. Assuming, neither of them fall into the second round. I mean, Genty won't, Hampton probably won't. did I say Genty twice? Hampton probably won't.
Yeah, that's fine.
Either way, whatever.
Gotcha.
I can't speak. It's fine. But I think from a pure Bears perspective, this isn't to say he's my running back 3, but my best fit for the Bears, what they need at running back, is probably Caleb Johnson, the running back out of Iowa.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think that when you take a look at what Ben Johnson likes at the running back position, or at least what he had in Detroit and what he had to work with and what he was so successful with, is you have a power back and a speed back. And I think DeAndre Swift, he's creative in space. I think his issue is he's not as good in between the tackles as a Jahmyr Gibbs type, but he's still, you get him out on screens, you get him out on wide zone, outside zone, you're going to be able to do some things with him. But that leaves a power back. And look, I like Roschon Johnson as a goal line back for sure. But at the same time, I feel like with such a run heavy offense, it's a pretty big risk to go rely on that for this is going to be the main power back guy. Cause that's someone who's going to be getting double-digit carries a game probably.
Yeah.
So I look at Caleb Johnson, I see, the size, the power, the toughness, he's an intelligent back too. He's patient out of the backfield. And once he finds an open lane, he shoots right through it. I mean, look, he's not the fastest guy. He's not the shiftiest guy in this class, but he's athletic enough. And I think whatever he might lack in like elite speed, he more than makes up for with his power, with the smart cuts that he makes in between the tackles. And I think that's what the Bears need. It's just a downhill runner that's going to be able to pick up 4 or 5 yards pretty consistently, sprinkle in a couple 10-yarders in there and, let DeAndre Swift break away in space for the, for the big games. But Caleb Johnson, someone I see being the body blows type of guy, and I could see him doing really well in that kind of role.
So Caleb is on your big board. He's your 5th tailback.
Yeah.
And you had the 2 Ohio State guys ahead of him. So if the Bears are going to the draft, which one of those 2 Ohio State guys you think would be better fit for the Bears?
I mean, it's tough because I have Quinshon Judkins higher than TreVeyon Henderson. I think they're both good for different reasons. And if we're looking purely from a Bears perspective, I mean, I have Judkins higher, both from a Bears perspective and on my board. Part of that just comes down to, better size and better power. But I do think that Henderson, at least on tape, is more explosive. I just don't think that that's going to be as much of the priority is having a speed back because DeAndre Swift isn't great in between the tackles unless there's a lot of room to work with. Which maybe with this offensive line there will be with the new guys they brought in, but I don't think that. I think that Judkins, even though he's maybe not as much of a power runner as you'd expect for a dude who's like 220, he's big and he's pretty strong naturally, so that's going to be able to allow him to run over guys. So I'd say Judkins over Henderson, at least for the Bears. They're both, very talented backs just for different reasons.
So I've heard a lot of analysts call this one of the best running back classes in like long time. Are you of the same vein? You feel the same way about this class?
I think so. Yeah. I think there's a pretty good chance that this ends up, at least, in my opinion, being the best running back class since looking back at 2017.
Okay.
I mean, which interestingly enough, you had Leonard Fournette come out, but you also had Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara, James Conner, a couple other guys that for some reason I'm blanking on right now. But those names in itself, I feel like there's one big one I'm missing. Anyway, that was a loaded running back class, and I think that this has the potential to be that good. I think there are going to be 2 first-round running backs selected in this class, and I think that you have a good handful of guys who could go round 2. I mean, depending on how teams feel about Cam Skattebo from Arizona State or Dylan Sampson from Tennessee. I mean, I'm really high on Bashal Tutton from Virginia Tech. Maybe a little bit higher on him than the consensus. But again, there's a lot of day 2 talent here. And then even further down the board, there are guys where I look at them, it's like, okay, I could see them being productive in the right system. So there's a lot of talent to work with. And even if, maybe not all these guys turn into 1,000-yard rushers, I think there are going to be a lot of contributors and guys who carve out niches for themselves in the role in their respective offenses. So I'm a big fan of this running back draft class, though, for sure.
Nice. All right, let's keep with the questions here. Remember, if you guys are watching live, Pop your questions in the chat, and I'm going to get to those once we can. We're going to run through some of the quick questions here on WCG real quick. NoHo Randy asks, what do you think the chances are the Bears will trade back from 10 overall?
Yeah, so I think it all depends on if they could get a good enough deal. Honestly, I think that if they get a decent enough deal, I'd be shocked if they didn't move down, honestly.
Yeah.
Just because looking at the value of this draft class, there's so much value on day 2, and I think there's a pretty massive drop off from the first, the top 6 or 7 guys in this class and then everyone else. So I'm going to be interested to see. It depends on who's available at 10. Say the Bears, if they don't want to go with like Will Johnson at cornerback at 10 and another team does, then maybe I could see a team trading up and the Bears, move back. But at the same time, if the Bears stay put at 10, it's probably going to be a little murky unless you get a Genty there or, unless Mason Graham falls for some reason. I know some people aren't on the first round offensive line hype train anymore. I still am if it's Will Campbell or Armand Membu. In general, if the first 9 picks play out the way I think they're going to play out, I definitely prefer to trade back. I think the Bears know that too. But at the same time, it takes 2 to tango, so you never really know for sure. But if they get a good enough offer, I don't think there's going to be anyone there where it's like, all right, this guy is so far and away the best player on the board. Let's hedge our bets. Let's get another second round pick or a 3rd round pick and more capital. And then, just work from there.
Yeah, I'm kind of like with you. Those 2 offensive tackles are pretty good prospects. I think if one of them are there, I think that's definitely a play for the Bears. We just did our SB Nation mock draft. It hasn't published yet. We're kind of going through the behind the scenes stuff, and I traded back from 10 as the pick for the Bears, and both tackles were gone. Mason Graham was gone. Ashton Genty was sitting there, but I don't know. Like you talk about this draft class, I think that the strength of this class is a little deeper. So I actually traded back from 10 with the Broncos. They moved up and they got Genty. I got their pick at 20 plus another 2nd round pick. So yeah, if Genty's there and then the Bears may have him highly graded, but someone may want to come up for him. And if that's the case, the Bears kind of, make that move and kind of go back and get their back later. So yeah, I'm with you. I think there's a chance to trade back from 10, but Will Campbell, even with those small arms, I think he's a tackle. Do you think he's a tackle?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do.
And then the other guy, Membu, right tackle, right? His whole career going back through high school, but he's going to work out at left tackle wherever he has his top 30 visits. And Kyle Long came out the other day, might have been today, saying that he played always on the left side. He moved to the right side in the NFL. Some guys can do it, some guys can't. So they're going to find out pretty quickly when they get Membu in these workouts and see how comfortable he is. But he's another guy, great athlete, great prospect, great technician, great power. There's some really good blue chips. Like you said, strength of this draft may be a little further back. So CCM on WCG asks, what is our most pressing need this year? So take free agency into account. Obviously, we know what just happened in free agency. What is your number 1 need for the Bears heading into this draft?
That's a tough one. Honestly, I'd say, all right, so I'm going to cheat and say defensive line. I'm not going to specify tackle or end.
It's okay.
But if I'm like really hard pressed to say one or the other, I'm going to say defensive end. And I think that I'm looking at it from the perspective of, you have Montez Sweat. He's going to be a starter next year. Dio Odeyingbo is going to be in the rotation there. He's going to be, they clearly have high hopes for him if they're paying him that kind of a big contract for, the inconsistent production in Indianapolis. And then from there, it's question marks. Austin Booker has a lot of potential. I feel like a lot of people, myself included, really liked him out of Kansas, but that was never going to be a guy who's going to have a massive impact in year 1. With him being the projected edge rusher 3, that's a pretty big projection to make for a guy who's only played 1 year and didn't really produce a ton. And I'm also not sold, they paid him a good amount and he's going to be there for at least 2 years probably. But Dio, if he, maybe he'd be better off in a rotation. I don't know. And I'm looking at some of the top teams in the NFL, some of the top defensive lines at least. They're rotating their defensive linemen. They're keeping them fresh. Yeah. And, even if you only play them for like 40, 50% of snaps, you can kick guys inside, you can move guys around. And, the fewer snaps they play, just naturally, the less tired they're going to be. So I think that that's something that I'm looking for is what are the Bears going to do at edge rusher? I think it's a really good class. I don't know what they're going to do as far as, maybe they take one in round 1 or they trade back or go to round 2. They have a ton of options, but it's a really deep class. I could see, I'm looking at, maybe like 16, 17 guys even who could go in the first 2 days of the draft. I think it's
at edge.
At edge.
Okay.
And I don't think all of them do, but those are the ones where I'm like, I could see them going off the board in the first 3 rounds and I wouldn't really bat an eye. I'd be like, okay, that makes sense pretty much. So yeah, it's a really good class. So
there's several guys also that kind of fit that Dennis Allen profile, right? I mean, historically, a lot of his defensive ends, he doesn't play him, outside the tackle. He plays a lot of more heads up, kind of like what a 3-4, 5-tech defensive end would be.
Yeah.
There are quite a few guys in this draft that kind of fit that mold as well. Some of them are more projections, but that's kind of what Deo is, right? He's kind of more of a projection when he was coming out. I mean, kind of came into his own this last year, but the Bears paid him because they feel his best football's in front of him. So they kind of get that same guy here in the draft coming up. Quick question here from Wendy Cynic at WCG. Why isn't Jalen Walker being mentioned as a possible choice? And one of the Bears linebacker starters is underwhelmed, large contract. The other one can't pass defend. Do you see Jalen Walker as someone that's in the mix for the Bears?
I mean, I think Jalen Walker is a tremendous football player. I think from an athleticism perspective, a versatility perspective, he brings just about everything you could want. He's just an insane athlete. He can play off ball. He can rush off the edge. My only question is he going to be a full-time edge? Because I don't know if he's big enough. I think that that's a concern that I have, especially in a base 4-3 where, again, you play in Dennis Allen's defense. The edge rushers play a lot of, square up to the offensive tackle type of play. So can Jalen Walker do that consistently? I don't know. I know he's an incredible athlete. He's got good pass rushing instincts. It could make sense. I mean, if they see him as an edge rusher full-time, then sure. If they see him as an off-ball linebacker, I think that's a little steep just because, I think there are more valuable positions and also bigger needs. So, but I do think Jalen Walker is going to go in the first 15, 16 picks or so. I see him in like a little bit of like a Frankie Louvu type of role, like what he does, where technically he's an off-ball linebacker. He plays a good amount there, but he also blitzes a good amount, rushes off the edge a bit. So I think he's someone you're going to have to get very versatile with. He'd be nice to have for the Bears. I think he'd be good with the Bears, but I don't know for sure if that screams Dennis Allen pick. So I don't know. He's someone I've never really been super I don't know. I've never really strongly considered Jalen Walker for the Bears just because I don't think he's their type, but really good football player.
It's that scheme fit, right? Like we just talked about, Dennis Allen likes his edges a little bigger. I know a lot of Bears fans, that have talked about him or kind of look at him like the old school Roosevelt Colvin role where he plays a linebacker and then on third down, you rush the passer. But, I kind of looked back a little bit through Dennis Allen's, coaching history, and I haven't really seen him do that much with his linebackers. His linebackers pretty much play linebackers, defensive ends play defensive ends. So, again, I think Walker's pretty good, but I just I'm like you. I never really bothered even looking at him as an option. I just didn't see it as even feasible there. So
yeah,
let's jump over to the YouTube side of things. Lokido Riviero asked, do you think Amarian Hampton could fall to our second round pick 41?
To 41, I don't think so.
Steve.
I think that I say 41 in particular. I mean, 39, I don't think he's there either, but I think 41 is even less likely because, I mean, at 40, you have the Saints, and they don't have a big need for running back right now. I mean, Alvin Kamara is still playing incredible football, but by all accounts, they're doing research into Ashton Genty. So I feel like that shows that, I mean, maybe it just shows they really like Ashton Genty in particular, but maybe it also shows they're looking for life after Kamara and trying to wonder what that's going to look like. So if Omarion Hampton's there, I could see the Saints liking him, honestly, with that number 40 pick. As I don't think he falls to 41. I don't think he falls to 39 either. If he does, I'm sprinting to the podium and taking him for sure. But all that said, I think between the Cowboys and the Broncos in particular, but even a team like the Chiefs, where Isaiah Pacheco is coming into a contract year, don't really know if you want to pay him big money. And then, if you go into the second round as well, there are a handful of teams who could use a running back. So I don't know. I don't think he's going to fall that far, even with the, like the discounted positional value of the running back position. I think that it's probably just going to, I don't know. I think it's more likely that Hampton's a top 15 pick than it is that he falls out of the first round.
Yeah, I've seen Hampton mock to the Bears at 10. Where teams taking Genty above him, and the Bears, a lot of these mock drafters are really tied into the Bears needing a running back. And I've seen a lot of them taking him there. And I'm not sure, like I said, I like the depth of this class. And if the Bears do pick a running back, even if it's Genty at 10, I'm going to be like, why are the Bears taking a running back that high when there's, so many more you can kind of get later on, address some needs in BPA earlier, but I will come around pretty quick if it's a running back at 10, because I mean, a running back, we have a good question here from on the WCG side of things from Dawisi. I'm not sure how he pronounces his username, but he's talking a little bit about how Genty yards after contact, the most missed tackles from PFF since 2010. Guy like that would just really elevate the Bears offense. So like I said, I would not be excited of the pick in the moment, but the more I sit and think about it, man, what he will do for Caleb, the offense, the new O-line, Genty would be really exciting of the pick at 10.
100%. I mean, I feel like every fiber of my being would try and fight against, it's a running back with a top 10 pick. Yeah. I'm like, I don't know about that. But I think Genty's a prospect where that sort of hype or that high of draft status is worth it.
Yeah.
And I think especially, I've come around to it too, where, I mean, he's always been a tremendous player. Like, watching him, come out in Boise State, even last year was really good, but this year was just phenomenal. This past year, 2024, was absolutely phenomenal. And I think that maybe if he were like 2-3 inches taller and did that against a Power 5 school, like he'd probably be the top running back I've ever watched. I think Genty's like right behind Bijan Robinson for college football running back prospects. So that's since 2017. So no Zeke, no I don't know, no Todd Gurley or anything like that. But since 2017, Bijan's my best, but Ashton Genty's probably number 2 at this stage from a grading perspective. And with what the Bears have done along the offensive line, I think they're in a really good position now to where if they do draft Genty, he'd be able to make a lot of things work. And that was a big concern of mine is the offensive line sucks. Why are you going to draft a running back at 10 if, it's the exact same issues? DeAndre Swift didn't have anything to work with. Now Ashton Genty's not going to have anything to work with, but you bring in Drew Dalman, you trade for Joe Thuney, you trade for Jonah Jackson. That offensive line on paper is looking a lot better. So again, we'll have to see how it operates in practice, but I think how aggressive they were in fixing the offensive line in free agency, I think that really opens up a possibility for Genty at 10, even stronger than it already was to begin with.
Let me ask you real quick about Jonah Jackson.
Yeah.
Obviously, he has the history of Ben Johnson, and every year you do your top 50 players in the NFC North. So I remember Jonah Jackson looking at him a little bit back when he was with the Lions, and I remember you had him ranked in your top there. So Jonah Jackson then, obviously Pro Bowler. Where is he now? I mean, do you think he's really going to add something? I mean, if you look at him from an athletic profile, he doesn't seem to kind of scream what Ben Johnson wants, but he thrived in his scheme before. They gave him the new contract, which a lot of Bears fans are like, what are they doing there? But this is Ben Johnson's guy, right? So I mean, if Ben Johnson believes in his guy, do you think Jonah Jackson would be one of those top level? Can he get back to the Pro Bowl level, you think?
Yeah, so I will say I think for him to get back to a Pro Bowl level, I think would be tough. But
yeah,
even if he's just a solid, reliable starting guard, that's a win. I don't think he even has to be great. I think he just has to be good.
Yeah.
Especially with like the inflated market nowadays in the offensive line. You know, anyone worth their salt as a solid starter is going to be making, 8 figures a year. So yeah, I'll admit that one extra year of extension was a little bit confusing to me because I thought, he's coming off a down year. He's coming off an injury year. That's a pretty big risk to just add another practically guaranteed year under his contract. That's, over $15 million a year. Would I have done that? No. But at the same time, I'm not Ben Johnson. I wasn't in there. I've never worked with him. I've never seen hands-on how he can fit in my specific offensive scheme. And I think that was a big part of it too. I mean, you got him for a 6th-round pick. That's hardly anything. And, being able to make that trade for a guy who, this time 13 months ago was seen as the top guard on the free agency market. He was seen as an up and comer. I mean, he got a big contract from the Rams for a reason. So I think I'm optimistic. The extension, I was kind of like, wait, but at the same time, I mean, I've seen what Ben Johnson did in Detroit. I have no choice but to wait it out and see. I mean, because he's shown he knows what he's doing. And if if Jonah Jackson really knows, if he's that last missing piece to the puzzle, then by all means go for it. So I'm not mad about that. I'm not mad about that trade at all.
I apologize. I went on an O-line rant with Jonah Jackson. I had this comment here pulled up from Chris 76 South over on YouTube. Yeah. He's really against the Genty pick, and then today he started thinking about it really hard, and now he wants Genty to Bears really bad. And then the flip side of that is, I'm going to scroll down here a little bit from this comment. Homesticko, I apologize for the name, but Genty being from Boise State scares me. Reminds me of Henderson, the running back from the Rams, was one of the best running backs, but low-level competition. So the Boise State thing, that's brought up quite a bit. Are you concerned at all about playing at a lower level of competition, or do you think the talent just stands out too much?
Yeah, I mean, and it's definitely a good question. I think that, looking at the fact that he doesn't play at a Power 4 school, it's something I factor into my evaluations. I mean, you ding, a couple of points, but nothing too major. I mean, it's not enough to bring him down an entire round or anything, but I want to point especially.
Jacob's having a little technical difficulties. I apologize for that if you guys are watching live. It's probably a good place to take a quick commercial break. For the podcast side of things, Jacob's going to try and jump back in on his phone here with the stream. So let me just go through the comment question here. Maybe find something I can kind of tackle. I'm not the draft Nick that Jacob is, but as far as some other stuff here, let's see what we got here. Anthony Victor, Ben Johnson has been talking a lot about getting Caleb back under center because he values the play action. Does that impact our running back draft implications? Oh, look, Jacob's back on his phone. Laptop was crashed.
I know. I don't know what happens because, I mean,
was it your cat? Are you going to blame it on your cat again?
No, this one wasn't the cat.
Okay.
This one 100% wasn't the cat. He's over there in the shades or whatever right now.
Okay.
This one was purely on me. So I don't know.
It happens.
Yeah, I was
technology.
Yeah, I was mid-sentence there. So
real quick, finish your thoughts on the Boise State and then the level of competition real quick before we jump into Anthony's question.
Yeah, no, definitely. So it's something I knock, but I want to, go back to that Oregon game where, he averaged over 7 yards per carry,
Yes.
a couple touchdowns on the ground. And I mean, sure, against Penn State, I feel like it was, a little bit of a different story. He wasn't as efficient, but again, I think that's uh, a Penn State defensive line, featuring Abdul Carter, uh, Danny Dennis Sutton and Zane Durant are two guys, one off the edge, one at D tackle, who I think definitely would have been drafted if they declared this year, but they went back to school for another year. It's a pretty talented group.
Yeah.
And I don't hold too much of that against him just because that offensive line really struggled. That was, that was part of the reason I was a little bit concerned where, uh, if the Bears were to take him without making the moves that they made along the offensive line, to where it's like, all right, you have a really good running back, but it's still the same bad offensive line. What are you going to do? Uh, so I don't feel as worried about that game in particular. I feel like when you're watching a small school prospect, you're looking for things that can translate. And I see with Genty, the quick processing, even like obviously, there are going to be some times where he has a completely open hole and he can, shoot through it. But there are also going to be times where he can wiggle through, he can wiggle around guys. And I think that's something that's really going to benefit him well at the NFL level. How tough he is, how low to the ground he is, and he's faster, I think, than a lot of people give him credit for. I think he didn't run the 40, but
Yeah.
his GPS stats are really good. I read something it was actually on Pro Football Network that said that Genti had one of the fastest miles per hour times of any running back in this class. Uh, and I
Well,
think that goes.
that's those next gen stats, right? They got those chips in the shoulder pads that kind of can check that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah,
I mean, the 40s, it's cool to see because that's as fans we can all relate to that 4.4, 4.3, 4.5, four
yeah,
six. We relate to that, but those miles per hour. I mean, that's what's key. That's football speed too, right? That's a little more
yeah.
important there. There's plenty of guys that they just don't test well. But you get him on the football field and no one gets going to catch from behind. So let's jump over to Anthony's question real quick. It's still in the same running back vein. Ben Johnson been talking a lot about getting Caleb back under center because he values the play action. Does that impact the draft implications at running back?
I mean, maybe a minor amount. I definitely, it could happen just because, taking a handoff out of the pistol or out of the shotgun is different than taking a
Yeah,
handoff, when the quarterback's directly under center. So that, it could be something where they look at that. It's like, all right, which colleges, like to have their quarterbacks directly under center, which isn't a ton anymore.
Iowa
Uh,
Hawkeyes run a lot of under center stuff.
Iowa Hawkeyes. That's
Caleb
the,
Johnson, yeah,
that's yeah.
okay.
It's all coming together. It's all coming
See,
together. So and that's the one where I point to. It's like, all right, if you do want to utilize Caleb more on the play action, have him under center more than having a running back who's experienced at taking handoffs when the quarterback's under center. I think that'd be very beneficial. So that's not to say where you're gonna take a. That's not to say you're gonna take an inferior prospect, just for the sake of, oh, they ran a pro style offense in college. But at the same time, that's something where you definitely. I mean, you keep it in mind if you have two prospects graded around the same, you think Caleb Johnson could have a bigger, could be a better fit in the system than a Travion Henderson or a Quinshawn Judkins, then sure, by all means. So that shouldn't be like a deal breaker by any means, but I feel like it's something that could definitely help. And for running backs like that, I think that's something that'd be beneficial.
I love play action. It's just such a cheat code. And I did an
Yeah.
article last month. I shared it again today on my Twitter. Ben Johnson's, Jared Goff, the top play action attempts the last couple of years, with the Lions, and the Caleb Williams last year in Chicago was, among the worst as far as how many times they let him do it. But when he did play action, his yards per attempt went up. So
Yeah.
play action is a cheat code. Even with the Bears struggling to run the ball, when they did play action, it always helps. Play action, it doesn't matter if you run the ball or not. Play action all the time, cheat code, especially if you had a good tight end. And the Bears have a pretty good tight end in Cole Kmet, and they
Yeah.
have another one drafted here coming up soon. So Alex Mihil asked, with the new kickoff changes, in case you guys missed it, the NFL decided to move the touchback up 5 yards. So that means they're trying to entice more teams to not kick it out of the end zone. They want more kickoffs now with the new kickoff rules, less injuries. They feel, hey, let's encourage kickoffs again. So they're trying to bring the kickoff back. So you think Ryan Poles will try and draft another wide receiver / running back who can do some return stuff in the third round?
I mean, it's definitely possible. I will say that, with the Bears bringing in Devin Duvernay on a 1-year deal, I think that he's someone who's probably going to project as the top returner. I mean, obviously, given what he did with the Ravens, took on a little bit of a less role with the Jaguars on special teams, but, or at least was less impactful. But his time in Baltimore, which was just like 2-3 years ago, was really good
Yeah.
as a returner. So, and I think he's a guy, he's still in his mid 20s. That's someone you give him the inside track to a role, to a role like that. But at the same time, I mean, if you have speed on the offense, there's no such thing as too much speed. And
Yes.
I think we've seen that with, what Ben Johnson did on the Lions. You're seeing the vision come through with, even just depth moves, bringing in Olamide Zaccheaus, bringing in Duvernay. I think, both speed receivers. Uh, I think that that's something that, points to what Ben Johnson wants that offense to be. Obviously, it's going to be a little different from what it was in Detroit because it's different personnel and you work with what you have. But I think a lot of the core values are still going to be there. So, uh, yeah, I certainly think that that's something where uh, it's possible. If they wanted to have a guy they think could be a good wide receiver 3, they see that in the third round. They see someone with returner experience. Say, like, if Isaiah Bond falls to round 3 out of Texas, the receiver, I think that's something they could be really interested in. Or, projecting if they like someone like Bashal Tutton, the running back out of Virginia Tech who ran in the 4.3s, someone they think, could be in a return specialist sort of role. I'd be all for it. It's just, the value has to be right. And I'm not taking a player in round 3 purely to be a returner. I think that's what the Bears did with Velus Jones, and it obviously didn't work out. Uh, but I think if they have enough value on offense as well, then I say, who am I to say no, honestly?
You mentioned Bayless. That's Duvernay, right? That's what the vision for Bayless Jones when Poles drafting was probably Duvernay. He can
Yeah.
return kicks, return punts, play some receiver for you as your fourth guy. So that the Bears are finally getting that guy now for Ryan Poles. So it just took him a couple years to get him. And I think the nice thing is Duvernay is still younger than Bayless Jones, or maybe not. I'm not sure.
I'd have to go look that up, but I'd say probably because Duvernay, he was a 2021 pick. Yeah, probably because Velus Jones was the next year, and he was already like 35 when he got drafted.
Wow,
So
man.
I'd say probably I'd say Velus is probably older.
Right.
Don't quote me on that for sure, but I'd say probably.
So E asks, how would you draft Nicholas Peter Bathus?
Okay, so this is I don't know if you can. Okay, you like paused up. I didn't know if that was my phone or what. That's a troll comment.
Okay.
There is no prospect named Nicholas Peter Bathus.
See, he's testing you on your 480 prospects. And
Yeah,
I never heard of the guy. I just figured I'd throw it out there. I figured if he's a
of
guy,
course. Yeah,
you
yeah,
scouted them, you would know best.
yeah. So that's a dad of someone I went to high school with who's a lawyer. So
Okay.
that's not a draft prospect. I mean, I'm sure, in his heyday he could run really fast, but that's not a draft prospect,
Okay.
unfortunately.
Okay. Well, he has a cool name though. It's
Yeah.
the three names there makes him sound like he's important. So let's go to Fuzz then. Thanks. If Carter, Hunter, and Graham are the elite tier of defensive players for the Bears, what players would make up the second tier of defensive players for the Bears scheme?
I mean, I think this is a good question, and I like to think of it as, if you're going for that second tier, that's probably more realistic to what you're going to get for the Bears at 10. I'd put some of the edge rushers there for sure, like Michael Williams out of Georgia. James Pierce is out of Tennessee is an interesting case because, there are the character concerns, or, at least that are reported. I don't know the guy. Maybe he's great. Maybe it's all BS. I don't know. But all I can do is speculate from that point. A little bit smaller for a Dennis Allen type defensive end, but he can rush the passer and he's a freak athlete. Uh, Shamar Stewart, I think I don't know. I think maybe like a Shamar Stewart is in that tier 3 for me. Just because I think he's someone who's a bit more of a late first round pick, but I think he's going to get drafted a lot higher than that because of his tools. I just have concerns about, him being a little bit more raw, him, from a pass rushing plan perspective, it's not all the way there. And obviously the lack of production. I mean, if your career high in college is 1.5 sacks, that kind of production's not going to cut it in the NFL. So that's a pretty big projection. So for second tier, I'd say Michael Williams, James Pierce, uh, would be Mike Green out of Marshall. I think that's another, touchy subject with, there's, some allegations, and again, I can't say definitively one way or the other. They'll figure that out. They'll do the investigation. But that he's also a little bit smaller. He's not a power 4 prospect. I don't have as much of an issue with that. I don't know. I think that's more of a tier 3 type of guy. So I keep getting derailed. So I'm gonna give my definitive tier 2. Michael Williams, James Pierce, Walter Nolan, the defensive tackle from Ole Miss, Kenneth Grant, the defensive tackle from Michigan,
Yeah.
Will Johnson, the cornerback from Michigan, and then Malachi Starks, the safety from Georgia. Uh, I know, some people are going to be a little surprised to see the defensive backs in there, but I think from a value perspective, it adds up. Will Johnson, I think, is one of the best pure players in this class, and if he didn't get hurt near the end of the year, I think you're looking at him as probably the pick for the Jaguars at 5. I mean, he's a really good football player, and you have the size, the athleticism, the instincts, the physicality, the ball skills. Like, he's a well-rounded football player. And then Malachi Starks too, I want to touch on because the Bears don't really need a safety right now, but both Kevin Byard and Jaquan Brisker are in the last year of their deals. Byard, he's got more football behind him than he has ahead of him at
Yeah.
this point. He's still a good football player, bring him on for another 1-2 years, but eventually somewhere down the line, you're going to need a long-term guy. And then Brisker, he's young, he's talented, he's played well, but with how much time he's missed due to injury and all the concussions that are piling up, it's really tough to say. I mean, and I'm no medical expert, so I can't say, oh, he's had too many concussions, he shouldn't play anymore. But it's definitely something to where it's like if he gets one more, considering how much time he missed this past year, it makes me wonder like, oh, I don't know if that's someone I want to give a 4-year, 50 something $1 million contract to. So I think at some point they're going to have to invest in safety. Maybe it won't be this year. Maybe they want to focus heavily on the trenches, but Malachi Starks is someone I think that testing be damned. He's one of the best, like on tape, one of the best college safeties I've seen. From, again, I keep saying the size, the fluidity, how quick he processes both in coverage and in run support. He's a willing tackler. He can make plays on the ball. Even if he doesn't have like elite speed, he has really good playing speed. And I think that's what's most important is you could be the fastest guy in the world. If you don't know what you're doing out there on the football field, then it doesn't matter. There's only so much you can do. If you're smart, you're a quick processor like Malachi Starks is, then that's someone who's going to be making plays. So that's my top. That's my second tier of defensive prospects. I know there's a couple of guys in there, a few that maybe just fell short, but yeah, that's what I'd stick with.
You mentioned Pearson Green edge, a little smaller than Dennis Allen usually likes. Some red flags. There's some rumors on both these guys. Nothing really, I think, is concrete. I think one may have a couple police reports out there floating around. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
if these check out, I mean, the Bears are going to talk with them. Obviously, they've talked to all these top prospects. They'll see what happens, especially if the Bears do move back off 10. If you move back off 10, you pick up another pick a little later in the first round, another second round pick. And I think if that happens, you mentioned corner, you mentioned safety. Now I think those two positions open up because you talk about how both safeties are out of contract this year. The whole room's out of contract after this year. There's not one safety under contract after this season. So maybe you don't have a huge need for a guy like Xavier Watts, but if he's high on your board and if you have a chance to get him when you get him and it makes sense for your football team, you know, you may as well pull the trigger. And then you mentioned a guy like Johnson. I mean, he's your second cornerback on the board, but again, if he starts slipping and if something happens where you can not only Johnson but another top corner, I think corner is another sneaky need because how much do you trust Tyreek Stevenson at this point because he had a rough sophomore season?
Yeah, I think I'm going to be interested in figuring that out because I think Stevenson, in theory, could be a really good fit for Dennis Campbell, where you have those lengthier, more physical cornerbacks. But
Yeah.
again, I feel like once that Washington game hit, and with the the Hail Mary, that blown assignment, I feel like something changed and it wasn't in a good way.
Well, football
So
is a mental game as well. I mean, there could have been something
yeah,
there. Like you said, he is a good fit for what Dennis Allen likes. Dennis Allen likes a little more physicality, so that could have had something to do. I mean, his rookie year was good. He
yeah,
started slow and he built up, which what you want to see from a rookie cornerback. And then year two, he had a nice start to the season, but like you said, the Washington game came and it all went downhill from there. You still got Terrell Smith on the roster. I think got some upside, but again, corner could be a sneaky need. And again, it depends how the board falls. Who knows what will happen here. Let's jump to a
absolutely.
quick question here from Berlismo. Asked to throw a couple of names out for you. Derek Harmon, Omar Norman Lott. Thoughts on those two guys?
Yeah, so I think that came in like around our like second tier of prospects.
Yeah.
Harmon's a very close, like very high in that tier three for me. I think he's someone where, at least in my opinion, I think that Nolan and Grant are a little more stout in their lower half, where Derek Harmon's a little more top heavy. But he's a really good athlete as well. He's someone who can rush the passer, quick hands, good pass rusher instincts. He's someone he fits that three technique sort of role. I think he'd be a good fit there. Omar Norman Lott is interesting because he's got really good tape. He's another super explosive. He's twitchy off the ball, low center of gravity, but he's just he's short. Like that. I think a big thing that comes down to it is Norman Lott. He's a bit undersized. I don't think he has like everyone says Aaron Donald is the go-to undersized defensive tackle comparison. I'd say a more realistic comparison is like Elijah Cansey with the Buccaneers, where first year had some struggles, second year started to come into his own a little bit, started to get a little more productive rushing the passer. I don't think that Cansey being a first round pick. I don't know if Norman Lott's tape is as good. Definitely another very good penetrating defensive tackle with, significant amount of juice. But at the same time, he's more of a day two guy for me. He's not necessarily someone I'd consider in the first round. Round three, I'd love him. I'd absolutely love him in round three. Round two, I'd be like, okay. But round one, I'm not really considering him.
Another one from Berlismo asked about Jihad Campbell. So linebackers another sneaky need. Obviously, the Bears let Jack Sanborn walk. He didn't get a big money deal with the Cowboys, but that kind of made sense based on where his contract status was as a RFA. They could get out of Tremaine Edmonds' contract after this next season. TJ Edwards, he's going to the last year of his deal. He may be a cap candidate, a casualty, possibly, depending on how he's plays. So you see the Bears going maybe with a linebacker at some point in the earlier part of the draft?
I wouldn't totally rule it out. I think Jihad Campbell's interesting in that I really like what he brings from a physical standpoint. He's the type of guy, I think he's one of the better linebackers at deconstructing blocks in between the tackles. And he's someone he moves really well. He's a big guy, long arms, but at the same time, still a little bit raw. I think there's some times where he's more reactive than instinctive, where it's just, oh, this guy's going here. Now I'm going to act on it, rather than I know for sure that he's going to go here. So I think Jihad Campbell's a very talented player. I think he's probably going to go round one. If he doesn't, he's going to go pretty early in round two. He's a top 50 player in this class, in my opinion, for sure. One of the higher ceilings for a defensive player in this class. I just don't know if if the value is going to be fantastic at 10 necessarily. But even in a trade down too, where your first round pick, if that's going to be an off ball linebacker, I think that at a certain point, if the positional value isn't going to be as high, I think the tape value should be undisputed. Where someone like an Ashton Genty, that's not a uh as valuable of a position at running back, but I think Genty is so good of a running back that you make it work. And that you don't, you overlook the fact that it's not an edge rusher or a cornerback or a tackle or a quarterback or whatever. Uh, but Campbell's a very talented player, though. I don't think the Bears are going to heavily consider a linebacker that early. Maybe in like late day two, early day three, if they can find a way to draft a guy in round five. I think that would be a fantastic range for a linebacker. Uh, Against especially Jack Sanborn, different defensive play caller for sure, but Jack Sanborn played a decent amount in those base formations, and I think there's someone they need a linebacker three. So even if that's just like a mid round guy to compete, I'd be all for it. And I can see at the bottom here the comments. You mentioned Danny Stutzman here out of Oklahoma, and with the caveat if he falls, excuse me, that he said in a follow up comment. Stutzman, I like a lot. I think he's someone where it just I feel like there's prospect fatigue on him at this stage, and it's a little bit frustrating to see because he's been good for a long time. He's someone, long, he's tall, he's well built, he's a good athlete, he plays hard. Uh, maybe some times where the tackling form isn't what it needs to be, but I think especially the physicality and the size and the motor that he brings, at the very least, I think can make him really good on special teams. And as a linebacker three, I mean, realistically, you're in a base 4-3 more often than not. If you're anticipating a run, I think Stutzman's more than good enough against the run, or at least could project enough to where I feel confident that he could be a good quality linebacker three right out of the gate. If he falls to round five, I don't know if he does. I've always kind of had him in like that mid late round three kind of range. So I could see him in round four, but the Bears don't have a fourth round pick.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
he's there in round five, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'd be doing cartwheels for sure with Danny Stutzman in round five. I don't know if he's there, but I like the player a lot.
Let me ask you a question about a current Bear on the roster, and that's Noah
Yeah.
Sewell, who,
Mm.
When he was drafted, a lot of Bears fans were pretty excited about the pick. Coming out, he had some nice film. Some fans thought he'd kind of double as an edge rusher. Obviously, that's not what he is. He's more of a Sam. But I didn't realize how young he was. He's one of the younger players on the roster. He's going into his third year as a pro. He had some injury issues the last couple of years, but his preseason film as a rookie was pretty solid.
Yeah.
When he has had a chance to play, he's looked pretty solid. Do you think there's a chance Noah Sewell kind of step up and kind of take over that Sam role as a starter for the Bears?
I mean, I think it's possible. I wouldn't entirely bank on it at this stage, just because I feel like, well, one, he hasn't really had too much of an opportunity to show it, which, that's not necessarily fault of his own when you have, guys ahead of you on the depth chart playing well, or, or in, some cases spending a lot more capital on them. So you have to start them. But, whatever, however you want to put it. But I always thought Sewell had a lot of potential. I liked that pick a lot when they made it back in 22. Is that 20? Yeah, 22.
Yeah.
Yeah, 22. Uh, was it? Okay. I don't know. I'm thinking myself into a circle here, but
He's
I
going
do.
to his third year, so do the math, everyone out there.
Okay. Oh no, so then 2023. If he's going
There
into
you
his
go.
third year, that was the 2023 draft. Okay, my bad. Uh, and with Sewell though, he's been solid on special teams, but again, the injuries, it's made it kind of tough to gauge. Again, I think that's a kind of similar situation to Austin Booker, where it's like, yeah, coming out of college, he's younger, he showed a lot of promise, uh, but there's not a massive sample size in the
Yeah.
NFL yet. I wouldn't plan on him being a starter. I'd give him an opportunity to compete. Absolutely. I'd give him a fair shot to compete. I feel like he's earned that, being on the roster here these past 2 years and, having been a fourth round pick. But that's not necessarily something where I want to just give it to him right out of the gate. So I'd look to, maybe bring in another veteran. I know they don't have a ton of cap space for this year anymore after the moves they've already made, but maybe there's a guy for cheap that you could find out there who's a core special teamer type of guy. Or you could take someone in, the fifth round, have someone compete maybe in the seventh or something, and then, or go as high as the third. But yeah, I'd say it's a sneaky need, but it's not one where it's like, oh, if they don't add any more linebackers, I'm going to be panicked, and that's going to be the X factor why the Bears don't make the playoffs.
Yeah, no, it's I think they may have picked up a vet or two, already. I forget. They always fill the bottom of that depth chart. You did mention Austin Booker. I want to ask you a question about him because Ben Johnson mentioned him today in one of his media hits. They said they want to get him to add a little bit of weight. Obviously, he came out again. You talk about he was a young prospect coming out. He was a redshirt sophomore, so I think he was 21 when he was drafted. Thin, but wiry strength for what he was. 6'5". He puts a little strength on, a little weight on in the off season. And like you said, I don't think he's going to be a starter guy at this point, but we do see Austin Booker having a future here as a sophomore in Chicago, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, he's earned, in theory, it'd be nice for him to step into a bigger role for the defense off the edge. And he's someone where, honestly, I thought when he declared for the draft coming into that class, I thought he was someone who should have stayed at Kansas for another year.
Yeah.
But honestly, this is essentially, it was a redshirt year for him. He didn't play a ton, but he got to work in an NFL, with an NFL coaching staff, in an NFL system, get the chance to get into that, the conditioning and the strength program. I think that's something that can benefit him for sure. Because you look at that last year that he had at Kansas. I know he was a backup at Minnesota before that, but the promise he showed at Kansas was really good. And you see the quickness, you see the length, the flexibility. uh, I think there's a lot to like there, especially as like a rotational pass rusher who's got juice. I think he's someone who could grow into that kind of role. Again, whether he does, we'll see. I still think that they need to bring in some sort of edge rusher to factor into the rotation. But again, if you're moving these guys around a lot, if you play Austin Booker like even 30% of the snaps, he's got a good opportunity to make some big plays. So
Yeah.
he's someone I'm looking forward to seeing how he does, especially in the camp and preseason here. I think that he's going to have a good opportunity to really build up some momentum.
With Dennis Allen's scheme, he kind of values the edge to kind of be to set that edge. He wants those guys to be good against the run. And I didn't think Austin Booker would be very good at that just because I looked at his frame and how he measured. But then you kind of see him and he is pretty sturdy at the point of attack where he's not getting really pushed off his spot. Do you think he can kind of make that next step and kind of really improve that part of his game to kind of earn more playing time for Dennis Allen?
I think so. I think he definitely can. And part of that comes down to gaining weight, gaining muscle, getting a stronger anchor, generating more bend in your knees, making sure you're winning with low pad level, winning the leverage battle. But I think that you're definitely right. For a guy who's got a little bit more of a gangly frame, relative to an NFL pass rusher, that is, he'd probably make me look foolish, honestly, if we did a side by side. But he's definitely someone where, even if he's not the biggest, even if he's not the strongest, he's competitive in the
Yeah.
run game. And I think that, that definitely showed it at Kansas, where there are sometimes he was able to get by off of, his physical attributes, not able to happen as much in the NFL. But at the same time, I think it's the motor, it's the want to. And if you can get him stronger, if you can, speed up that processing a little bit, I think you could really have something to work with there.
We talk about Booker gaining weight. I want to ask you one more question before I get you out of here. We're just at about an hour now, so I told you I wouldn't keep you too long. But Ben Johnson did talk about Braxton Jones today. He said he wants to see him add a little weight, get a little strength. Obviously, everyone knows his anchoring problems, But, Ben Johnson now talks about him here, said he probably won't be ready for the early part of training camp, but it's not like he's going to be, missing the whole season. He'll
Yeah.
be back at some point. Again, we go back to the first round draft pick at 10. If it's a tackle, we're both kind of in the camp like, yeah, I think that's something you got to do. Where are you if the Bears don't address tackle early? And if they do say, hey, let's just roll with Braxton Jones here as our left tackle here in the next season, let's see what happens and we'll play it by ear. You think Braxton Jones is going to take a step and be able to kind of work in this Ben Johnson scheme?
I mean, I certainly hope so. I think that's someone where obviously, you like to root for the homegrown talent for sure, especially with him being a fifth rounder coming from a small school. Seeing how he's been able to develop has been really good. Uh, you know, especially relative to the investment that you're putting into him. But I think now you're entering year 4 as a starting left tackle in the NFL. I think the expectation becomes higher where he's been solid, I think is a fair way to put it. He hasn't been amazing. He hasn't been bad. I think that there can sometimes be a little bit too much hyperbole on both sides. He's a solid starting tackle.
Yeah.
The question is that someone that in this current market you want to pay over $20 million a year to? I don't know. So I think that there's definitely going to be some pressure on Braxton to, take that next step and to prove that without a shadow of a doubt that he's that guy. Because I think someone's going to pay him next offseason. It's just going to be a matter of if it's the Bears or not.
Yeah.
Uh, if they don't do anything at tackle, I mean, I won't hate it. I think Braxton Jones, like I said, he's a solid starter. I think Karana Magaji is getting written off a little bit too early. I always thought that he's someone who's not going to start year 1, and he didn't. And part of it was he's coming from a small school and he suffered a serious injury. He didn't get to practice the entire offseason. And that's something I think that this go around having the chance to get into that full speed and to I mean, I wouldn't say athleticism or strength are either weaknesses of his, but from a technical perspective, work on the hands, work on the pad level, work on the footwork. I think he's still someone who's got a good amount of upside, and so I wouldn't hate it. But at the same time, if Braxton walks in free agency and Karan doesn't take the steps that you want
You're screwed.
in year 2, you're screwed.
Yeah.
Because then you're either forced to pay big money to an average left tackle in free agency.
Yeah.
You have to trade something significant to get someone, or you have to start a rookie all over again at left tackle. So I don't know. I think that's someone where maybe if they see a guy who's got like tackle guard versatility, and there's like, okay, we think you could play left tackle, but we also think you could be a guard. Say, if we're starting our best 5, we could kick you inside and, keep Braxton at left tackle, whatever it might be. That's why I keep saying, I'd take Will Campbell at 10. I'd take Armand Membu at 10. I think both of those are either guys who could be, starters at tackle or guard in the NFL. After that, I don't know if the value's perfect, like a Josh Simmons or a Kelvin Banks. Maybe if you trade back, but I think I understand the people who don't want to go offensive line in round 1. I really do, but I'm drafting for the future. I'm not just drafting for year 1.
Yeah.
And if the value's there, a player like Will Campbell, a player like Armand Membu, they're going to find a way to start in your offensive line, no matter what. I mean, like I said, with Joe Tooney, he's going to turn 33 in the middle of the year. Jonah Jackson coming off the injury, coming off a down year. You don't really know what you have there. I think it's definitely there's a path for those guys to start down the line. So,
Well, I think you look at the Eagles, right? You look at the Eagles have done, they always are addressed in the trenches, and they have a guy go down injury, another guy steps in. They have a guy retire. They have a guy ready to step in.
Absolutely.
Like I said, you're not drafting for now. And I know a lot of Bears fans say, well, at 10, he has to be a guy that comes in and makes an impact right away. Well, that's not always the case, especially in this class. That may not happen. And let's say that it is an offensive lineman at 10. Let's say that is who the best guy is on their board. And let's say Will Campbell doesn't beat out Braxton Jones as a rookie because, rookies take some time to kind of come around. Braxton Jones going into his 4th year. He may be a little higher, as far as the skill set, as far as the NFL game, Ben Johnson will find a way to get that 10th pick rookie offensive lineman in the game. He uses a lot of 6th O linemen during the course of the game. So I think he'll find a way to get anyone in play here and just draft some damn good football players and let Ben Johnson go to work, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's interesting, you bring up the Eagles because, I was looking into it and they drafted Landon Dickerson in the second round in 2021. He was supposed to be a backup. They drafted him with the expectation that's a backup. But Brandon Brooks got hurt at right guard. They kicked Dickerson, who's, naturally a center. They kicked him out to guard, where he's been ever since. The following year, they drafted Cam Jurgens, uh, but then Isaac Suomalo got hurt, and then he had to kick into guard as well. And then when Jason Kelsey retired, you're starting Cam Jurgens and Landon Dickerson. Both of them made the Pro Bowl last year. So, I mean, granted, those are both second round picks as opposed to first rounders, but it still shows, the Super Bowl champions are taking this approach. I think that's a pretty good team to, follow in their footsteps. I think especially there's some really good offensive line talent in this class, and it's not necessarily a reach where it's like, oh, we need to pick an offensive lineman just for the sake of picking an offensive lineman. No, I think there's really good value potentially at 10, especially at 39 and 41.
Yeah. Now, I mean, plus if you trade back off 10, you pick up another second round pick or a third round pick.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Like if they come out of this draft with 3 new offensive linemen at some point, I'm having no problem with that because, what's the depth right now? Bill Murray, Ryan Bates, who may not be here much longer after this season, Karan Amagashi. I mean, Ben Johnson mentioned him again today, but again, we're talking about a project. So add to the trenches, add football players, add talent, and I think this team is going to be in a good place. But Jacob, that's an hour. I told you I only keep you an hour, a little longer than that. Man, I appreciate it, man. It's always good getting a chance to talk to you about some football, about some draft. Again, everyone follow Jacob Infante at Jacob Infante 24 on the Twitter. And you're also on the Blue Sky at Jacob Infante, right?
Yes. Yeah. I just joined actually right before Twitter X broke down during free agency. I'm like, all right, I should probably get on Blue Sky just to be safe.
Just to be on the safe side. Yeah. It's probably a good place.
Yeah. And luckily, we have some people there from from Windy City Gridiron, from Second City Gridiron, that family, who helped get the word out a little bit that I was on there. So I'll admit I'm not perfect with updates on there, but I share what I can. And, every once in a while I'll, remember to copy and paste my post from Twitter over to Blue
That's
Sky.
all I do. I just copy and paste everything. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So, do what you can. Do what you can. Right. As many eyes as you can. Just get it out there.
Someone said get on Threads. I tried Threads. I got no traction on Threads. I tried Threads and Blue Sky at the same time. I'm like, let's see which one takes off. Mm-hmm. I got nothing off Threads. It was like, I don't know if I wasn't hitting the right algorithm or what, but I got nothing off Threads. So I just stopped messing with Threads because I couldn't get it. I couldn't get any traction on it.
I mean, it's tough. It's tough to get traction. I mean, to start over, completely on a new site. You just got to hope that, I mean, especially you build something on Twitter, you build something in the online community that someone's going to pick up and be like, oh, Lester's on here, Jacob's on here. There they are. It's not easy. It's not easy. So, I mean, that's what they pay people professionally to do stuff like that. So that's, that's above my pay grade for sure.
I think the key is to have that one post that goes viral, like after a Lions game loses. Game sucked. Time to let's get out of here, Jacob. And again, I appreciate it. All the people in the comment section helping out. Everyone on WCG that dropped their comments in there is appreciate you guys as well. So until next time, for Jacob, I'm Lester. Bear down, my friends.